Do you think your business is too boring to have a podcast? Well, think again, because today we are bringing on someone from the least sexy part of real estate who has an amazing show, Mr. Mike Ham, right here, right now on Air Brands.
You are now tuned in to the On Air Brands podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the On Air Brand Show. I'm Todd Genetasio, along with my guest host today, Mr. Mike Ham. Mike, what's going on, sir?
What's up, Todd? My ears were ringing because you said something about working in the least sexy part of the real estate industry and also having an awesome show. So I was like, ooh, me, that's
Boom.
me.
Jump right in.
Yeah.
Well, and that's basically what happened was, we got a text from Amber last night, the usual co-host here, and actually an active attorney, and she had to be in court today for some stuff. We were looking for a fill-in, and you popped to mind immediately when Josh, Eric, and I were talking about who could potentially hop in here. And, you came to mind immediately for me because you are using the power of podcasting and having a show to build your business, right? You're not like, oh, I like telling cool stories. I'm going to get on the mic and see what happens. It's like, your business and you have a podcast here tied together. So walk us through a little bit, like from the beginning, like how did the morning spotlight come to be? How'd you get the idea and when did you kick it off?
Wow. All right. That's a very big question to kind of kick it off. But first off, like I said on the PodMax show just before this, I'm going to do my best to be a good co-host just because I know how awesome Amber is. And, I have a big shoes to fill for sure.
Yeah.
So the morning spotlight started really in May of 2020. So my whole job, I sell title insurance for a living. So I work for a huge Fortune 500 company selling title insurance here in New Jersey. My whole job is literally to take people out for lunch, go to get drinks, go out to events, different things like that. I'm a schmoozer, for lack of a better word. I just talk to people all the time and try to build relationships. Obviously, you're a Jersey guy. I'm a Jersey guy. We got crushed at the beginning of, March, April, May. Couldn't do anything. Even into the summer, people were still a little bit skittish about, going to get lunch or there was no events happening.
Yeah.
So I needed a way to get my name and my face and keep myself relevant to the people that I need to keep myself relevant to. Real estate attorneys, developers, people like that. So I started running almost immediately. Like I think lockdown was around like March 17th. Is that right? Like somewhere around that date. And I think the following Tuesday, I started running virtual happy hours. So I would run every Tuesday virtual happy hour, did it for 13 weeks in a row, then did it every other week after that, and just started posting about them on LinkedIn and saw that I was starting to get more and more traction on LinkedIn. Excuse me. And then I also noticed that when I put a video out, I would get more engagement. So then I was like, well, I have all these people that are in my network, whether they're real estate specific or not. I just have so many people that I can pull from and maybe start this thing. So I reached out to 10 people right out of the gate and I said, this is what I'm thinking. We're going to call it the morning spotlight because every weekday morning at 9 a.m., we're going to post a 5-minute video of me interviewing you. And I use that very loosely because I would basically write down 3 questions, send it to them. They would know what the questions were. A lot of times they would know what the answer, they would have their answers written down. So obviously it was very engaging content, very fun, just 2 people reading on a Zoom call. But
we all got to start somewhere.
Exactly. Right. I mean, I needed to do that because I was not the person that you see here on the camera right now, but it was basically like I would sit in my dining room out in my apartment on my Mac with my earbuds in, and that's how I started my show. So I figured COVID would be over. I figured, it would last like 3 or 4 weeks. I would run out of people to talk to anyway. Next thing I know, I'm 12 weeks in doing 60 episodes of interviews. I did a couple like blooper reels and some things like that just to kind of, break it up a little bit and fill in some holidays. And then eventually I just decided, why not transition it into what it is now? So we do an episode a week on Tuesdays that is focused on real estate. So we brought it back to the core of what it is that I do. Since then, we've evolved it several times. It was funny that the PodMax guys were talking about that before because my show has evolved probably like 3 or 4 different times over the last year. And now it's in this space where I do still do my traditional Tuesday episode where we talk about real estate, or we talk with a person in the real estate industry and just kind of get to know them and what they're up to. And now every Thursday we do something that's a little bit different. So we've had on NFL players, Olympic athletes, musicians, other podcasters, just a lot of different people that I just find cool, because I call myself the coolest guy in title insurance. So why not have other cool people on? And that's kind of how the brand has grown from May of last year when it first started. It was like a little rinky-dink operation to now. It's still a little bit rinky-dink, but we're like we're maximizing, it's like one of those like old cars that can still go really fast, but it's just held together by bubble gum and paper clips. So
which is amazing to hear you say, because like you look the part, right? Like you have you have the perfect setup here. You look like a professional video podcaster. You got the mic with the boom arm and the pop filter, and you got your headphones. You got this pro looking background, which until you said screen earlier before we went on, I didn't even realize was a screen. It's like you even got the ratios of the picture frame sizes down to look proper behind you. Like, and yet, we all feel this way of like, everything's just held together with bubble gum and spit. So to hear you say that, but to everybody on the outside looking in, you're running a professional gig here.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that sometimes I've had to have some conversations at work where it's more to the effect that like, wow, like this show looks really professional. How serious is he about his actual job? And the answer is very serious, because if I'm going to put something out here, I don't want to. Can I say ass? I don't want to half-ass it. Yeah. You got to whole ass it. You got to go 100%. You got to go all in, because if you're going to do something and you're going to use it to grow your business, you need to put the best product possible that you can out there. And it's funny because I look back, back in May when I was doing that LinkedIn show, that was the best that I could back then. Right. I couldn't do any better because I just didn't know any better. Yeah. Then the more I started putting myself out there, coming to PodMax, doing different things like that, where I started to see what other people are doing, actually listening to other podcasts, because I had never done that prior to starting one. And my whole mindset was just listening to, WFAN, Mike and the Mad Dog, Boomer and Carton, all those kind of people that talk about sports all day. So I was like, I'm going to try to do something like that, but I had no idea how they actually did it. But then just over time, it's gotten, my capabilities have grown just by putting myself out there and trying different things and seeing what sticks. That's really the name of the game.
That's such a great lesson for everybody who thinks that, who feels hesitant about getting started, is that, the truth is that we all suck when we start doing anything for the first time, and you keep doing it. And eventually you suck so little that you're as good as Mike Ham.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great way to put it, for sure, because obviously I'm just incredible, but it just makes me excited because, you've been podcasting for a lot longer than me, I think, right? How long have you been podcasting for?
I've had a few different shows dating back a couple years. So I think my first show was 2016-ish, maybe 2017. So I've had a couple iterations, and but it did always start. I mean, when I started, trying to think, like, it definitely was no webcam, no, I got a little ring light going on here. I got obviously the pro mic, but when I got started, it was, the headphones that came with my iPhones plugged in and using the webcam that came on my Mac. And it was, like you said, same exact thing. We had it was called it was like expert. It was some kind of expert series or something we did for Propelify, and it was just me hopping on with people I knew were experts in their field and were interesting to talk to, and having those interesting conversations. And we, hit the go live button on Zoom, and that's how we got it started. So very similar.
Right, and then just look at like where you are now. I mean, now I'm sure, like, if we compared you talking to me right now to that first ever, couple episodes. I mean, I do that sometimes too. Mine are on my YouTube channel, and I'll scroll back all the way to the very beginning and watch a couple of those. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. But it just, then I look, have some perspective on the whole thing, and look at kind of where I'm at now. I'm a little over a year in, if you count that original show. Yeah. And this is what I'm capable of, and I've seen my guests level up. I've seen work for my title insurance business increase because of this.
Let's pull on that. Let's pull on that thread. So, you started this as talking to other people in real estate to keep your relationship building going and keep those conversations. Like, first, what's the relationship between, like, you work at a huge company, right? Like, it's not your own business. So, did you have to go through any kind of compliance or approval, or like what was that process like, or what is it like in terms of like you putting out content when you have an employer?
So I have always been trying different things on LinkedIn, and even when I started, like originally when I started trying to I was a college baseball coach before I started selling title insurance. So I literally had no frame of reference on how to do my job when I started this. And so I started trying to do like regular phone calls, like picking up the phone and calling attorneys and whoever. They don't want to talk to you, so, and especially, attorneys that are on the older side. So like I'm 30 years old. So I was calling attorneys that were 65 or 70 or whatever. They don't want to talk to me, because they have these because the title insurance industry is all regulated. So it doesn't matter what company you go to, you're going to get charged the exact same price for essentially the exact same product. The forms look the same. It's just the logo at the top is different. So I needed a way to try to shake things up a little bit. So I started trying LinkedIn, because if I want to try to attract attorneys that are in my age bracket, and most of my work comes from attorneys that are between the ages of 25 and 40, probably, I need to be where they are. So I started doing my cold calls on LinkedIn and got clients from that just by putting myself out in that space. So when it came time to do the show, I just started it. Because the one thing that I really like about my job is that it's very entrepreneurial. So yes, I work for a big Fortune 500 company, the largest direct operation title insurance underwriter in the country. But they give you a lot of free, like, as long as you're hitting your numbers and and you're bringing in what you need to bring in, they're okay with to try something. So that was my first foray. Yeah. That was my first foray into doing LinkedIn way back 4 years ago. Then last year, obviously trying the first little, I was doing the virtual stuff, then the first little show. And then, I talked to my boss about maybe leveling it up a little bit and seeing if they could help out. And they were all very, receptive to that idea. So no, occasionally there's been a couple conversations this year, just because I think that, and I'm sure you could speak to this too, you don't see return right away when you're putting out content. And content's just one of those things, whether it's a podcast or whether you're trying to, crush it on social media, where you could put stuff out all day and it's not going to be like, hey, I saw your post, here's $100 million deal. It doesn't happen. And if that happens, then tell me what the algorithm is that makes that happen, because I haven't cracked that one yet. But, I think that's just one of those things where it just took time, and then I saw, like, towards the end of 2020, when I obviously, things started to open up a little bit more. And then, you get into 2021, where the stuff that I had done started to pay off a little bit. And I started to close more deals and, open more deals and reach quotas faster than I have previously in my lifetime. So, I just think that that's one of those things where content creation is a long game. Like, it can't be, let's just put some posts on LinkedIn and then expect to get deals in return. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny because 2020 basically, like, you had nothing else to do or go, right? Like, all the time you spent doing other things was taken, was freed up.
Yeah.
And so you kind of had, you had the ability to have the patience to play that longer game and try something out for a while and see what happened. And that's exactly what happens. And we were talking about on today's PodMax podcast episode was the real estate hackers event that's going on this weekend. And the way that started was Chad, was a guest on Eric's show, and he's like, whoa, this podcasting thing's pretty cool. Maybe I could, maybe I should start a podcast. And he did. And he just did it, to get the conversations going and create something that was cool. And that built up. And now they have, I forget how many they said, hundreds and hundreds of people going to this event this weekend, which, by putting out the content, it builds an audience, and an audience is like the best asset that your business can have, right? Like I always say, the reason why I think having a show is so powerful for all businesses are the two assets it creates is content and audience. And when you have content as an asset, there's a lot of different ways you can promote it to create relationships at scale, to have people finding you, to nurturing people along. Once you meet them the first time, like you said, you don't get $100 million deal out of nowhere. You got to stay on top of mind with them for a long time. And by putting out content regularly, those are assets that can keep you engaged without just having to send spammy follow-up messages for 3 years. Hey, are you ready for a title insurance? Are you ready? Like,
right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, because I think like when I do my normal job, which is, be in person and schmooze with people.
Yeah.
You get like, let's say I take you out, your prospective client. I take you out to lunch. I sit with you for an hour. We talk, we have a great time. Then how much more follow up can I do before you're saying this guy's so annoying? Like I need to get him away from me.
Yeah.
But then you frame it in a different way. We go to lunch. We sit there for an hour. We get to know each other really well. But then like you scroll through Instagram or you scroll through LinkedIn or you come on the podcast or I invite you on, whatever it is. Next thing you know, my face is just in your face more often. And that's what it is. Like you just need to people need to remember you. My greatest fear last year, and I think a lot of what I did last year was motivation out of fear, was that I would come into 2021 or whenever, things got back to normal and people would be like, oh, Mike, I had no idea you were still selling title insurance. Like, are you kidding? Like that's who wants that? And so, I mean, there's only so much you could do through emails and following up and whatever. And, just Zoom calls that have no purpose aside from maybe just touching base.
Right.
But you start giving them value, whether it's entertainment or education. And next thing you know, they're just like, wow, that Mike, I don't know why, but I just seem to know, like, and trust him a lot more than maybe I did prior. Or maybe
you're here right now because of that. You came to my mind immediately when we were thinking who could be a host on tomorrow's show. And you came to mind right away. And so it works. And in the non-spammy way, it's just being visible. And I always say, activity equals visibility equals opportunity. And that's exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the more you show up and the more you show up as close to authentic as you possibly can, the better opportunities that you have to build trust with people that you're not actually touching directly. It's just an indirect touch. But because I just show up as me, like this is it. Like when I go visit Eric and Josh next week, this is what they're going to get, so I hope that they're ready. But I think that, that's one of the things, especially online, because, people scroll fast, their BS meters are very finely tuned. So the more you can put yourself out there as just you and show up as often as you possibly can, people just resonate with that a little bit more and they start to trust you more without actually having to have a sit down conversation with them and develop that rapport, I guess.
Yeah. And the BS meter is a big thing when it comes to the authenticity, like you're talking about, but showing up in the feed. When we work with clients, a lot of them think it takes, a lot of professional design or high production quality stuff and going through this whole process of creating graphics and blah, blah, blah. But the truth is our BS meter, like we've been trained since we were little that commercials are trying to sell you something. And so our BS meter is scrolling through the feed at lightning speed. And if we see something that's very polished and produced, that screams commercial, which tells me they're trying to sell me something, which means I don't need to slow down to pay attention to that because I don't feel like buying something right now. But when it looks real, like a normal person is posting it, it fits in the context. It's like I'm slowing down for half a second to see that and pay attention to it and catch, what's that first line of the caption say? Do I want to pay attention more? But when it's too polished, that actually lights up the BS meter faster for people, which is funny.
Yeah. Right. Which is like that fine line you have to walk. I mean, especially because I'm trying to get the most out of what I have, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And, I mean, how far do I push it? Because I'm a one-man show. Like I am head chef and chief bottle washer here at the Morning Spotlight. And I, am a sales executive with Fidelity, but I do it all. So I'm trying to squeeze as much juice as I possibly can while still maintaining that, authentic feel of putting myself out there in front of these people. So, I mean, I definitely agree with that.
And it helps with speed too, right? Because if you did have to come up with like animated graphics for every segment of your show every single day, like, it would take you, that would be the full-time job as opposed to being able to do the other stuff. So I am curious, you're the one-man show DIYing this whole thing and it's great. Like how much time do you have to put into all this every week?
Is this being recorded? No, I mean, so probably it all depends because what I've been trying to do, especially as I knew that we were going to start to have more opportunities to do in-person stuff, I tried to front load as many episodes as I possibly could because obviously, like you said, last year I had ample time You know, it's basically just like, you send me a time if you want to be a guest on the show, and I'll set it up and we'll do it. You know, it was really no rhyme or reason to my schedule, but now I have to be a little bit more methodical on how I put all that stuff together. So I would say, I mean, a few hours a week. I mean, I do my own editing. I am not the best audio editor, but I mean, I like to think that I do put out a quality product on the other end. So, you know, I would say a few hours, because I do record the episode, obviously, edit it. And then I put together a couple, you know, two videos that I put together on iMovie, you know, like a short video and a longer video for maybe like an IGTV or something, and a Canva post. And I send that to the guest and just kind of let them do with it as they please. So, you know, all together, I would say probably like 3 or 4 hours a week, you know, maybe a little bit more.
That's a great little tip there too, is that you send it to the guest too, because I think a lot of shows, even when they do their own promotion, they're not necessarily sending assets to the guest that the guest can then promote for themselves, right? That's another huge benefit for people to want to come on your show.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%. When I started, I would just like ask them to share, you know, like, I'm going to post this stuff. If you could share it, that would be great. I mean, 5% of the time they would actually share it. So it really didn't do anything, you know? And then now I think giving them something, you know, and being like, hey, especially if we're, you know, recording an episode maybe a month or two prior, giving them something as we lead up to that episode kind of reignites that fire and makes them excited again about coming on the show, that they, you know, they're excited that they were on the show back then. The episode's finally coming out, and you give that to them, and then they're more likely to actually share it with their community. And that's the whole point of having guests, because you want to leverage their communities to hopefully increase your community.
Yeah, totally. And I also love having guests, you know, picking guests strategically. And in the last show I did before On Air Brands, that's what it was. Basically, I used my show for business development, because cold outreach to people, asking them to get on Zoom and have a meeting, versus saying, hey, I have a podcast talking about your area of expertise, I'd love to have you on. You know, I had essentially 99% response rate for people interested in coming on. And then that's how I opened and created relationships with people who I wouldn't have been able to do that before, or reigniting or re-engaging, you know, existing relationships that I wanted to get, where I didn't want to just have another one person show. And I think, and again, turning the conversations into content assets, where, like you said, you go out to lunch with someone, you have a one-on-one conversation, maybe it's great and it turns into one piece of business. But what happens when you just record that conversation and use it to amplify both people online? Well, that conversation that was maybe a 1-to-1, you know, input 1, output 1, now it's input 1, output 100. And you're creating so much more amplification by just, you know, digitizing the conversations and turning them into assets for the business.
Right. And it really just comes down to, I don't care what business that you're in. I mean, obviously it's a little bit more imperative in my business, because it's all built on relationships and service. If one of them stinks, you're not going to get any business. If you have bad relationships, obviously. If you have bad service, obviously. So it just really comes down to, there's a lot of good title companies out there. I mean, you can go and get good work done by other companies, but why would you want to come here? You know, obviously you need to be able to figure out a way where you can add value beyond just like the fact that you may like me, you know? So like I mentioned before, I mean, I've had clients on the show. I've had prospective clients on the show. Like you mentioned, I've amplified my scope to include people around the country. Now I'm doing deals in other states beyond New Jersey.
How does that work? Are you licensed just in New Jersey, or you can go full national?
I'm licensed just here in New Jersey, but because we're so big, and I can refer deals to other offices. You know, and then so that just everybody wins in that regard. But that's great. But yeah, so doing deals, you know, now in New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, other places that, you know, just by meeting people through the show, or meeting people virtually, or even connecting with people that were on other shows that I've listened, or whatever it is. You know, I think that then you all of a sudden you know, you start leveraging not just your community, but then other people's community to try to amplify that value add, you know? So then, I mean, like, I know that it must be working, because I've seen other people in the title world start podcasts since I started mine. Nobody beats the drum as loud as I do. I mean, obviously, but yeah, I mean, I'm seeing it happening. So it must,
that's awesome.
There must be some you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Some merit to what I'm doing. You know, so that's where the value add comes in. You have to add value in any way that you can. And this is how I'm trying to do it.
Yeah, I love that. So when you got started, like how long for the people listening who are like, oh, wow, all right, I'm sold. My business I thought was boring, but it's nothing compared to the title insurance industry. And it's working for this guy who started off with his just a pair of headphones and his laptop on his dining room table. Like, how long did it take for you to start seeing some kind of traction? Not necessarily dollars in the bank, but like you set out with the virtual happy hours, and then you started doing the morning spotlight videos. How long was it before you started to be like, whoa, something's happening here?
I would say almost immediately when I started doing those little videos, because I was rolling with my happy hour. So I would post and I would tag everybody that came to the event, and we would get 35 to 45 people.
Oh yeah,
every
that's
week.
A lot of people. Yeah.
So then next thing I know, I'm posting about that, and then people want to come and join the event. Then I put this idea out to my 10 core people that were at every basically event that I ran, and the response to that was great. And then started posting those, and then people started seeing them, and they're like, "Oh, what is this?" And and my view count was honestly great. I mean, I would get 750 views plus, which may not be, like incredible, but that's solid. And then engagement on it was also really good. I mean, there were a couple maybe duds along the way, and not because the guest was bad. It's just going to happen.
Yep. Or that day on LinkedIn, there's something else was trending. Who
exactly
knows?
Yeah. And I think that LinkedIn algorithm thing. I mean, I don't pretend to understand it. I was just trying things and seeing what worked. And then when I decided to transition it into what it is now, I knew the quality was going to be a lot better, but I knew that the total, I was going to see if I got 750 or 1,000 views on a LinkedIn post, I'm not going to get 750 to 1,000 views on a episode of the podcast. It's just a very different, thing. And I knew that going in, which, and even though I did know it, it was still like a little bit, it hurt me a little bit, because now it just seems like my audience has shrunk. But you still start showing up on those platforms. And even if you put like I was going to say an hour and a half, a minute and a half video up on LinkedIn of that episode, which is what I do anyway, people are like, hey, I love this podcast. Even they might not even listen to the whole thing. But because that one gets 500 views, the podcast at the beginning was getting, 25 to 50 views or listens, and then this thing starts to snowball a little bit, and you start combining those numbers, and you're just like, oh, this actually works. It doesn't have to be, Rogan numbers or whatever. It just has to be numbers that work for me.
Exactly.
Yeah. You have to know your audience. I mean, you might not have an audience that's huge. If you have a very, if I was super niche in title insurance, I mean, how many listens do you think I would possibly get? 20, if that show was crushing it. Yeah.
and the thing is, like you said, like, it's kind of like knowing what your goals are and being realistic within it, and seeing like, how can you get traction early in ways that make it worth it. And it's like, for one, you're just building the relationships that you were trying to build anyway. So you happen to be recording them and putting them out. But you were already spending, like, if you're already spending the hour that you would have gone out to meet them for coffee or lunch or whatever. Now you're spending that, doing the interview and then putting it out on social. And so it's not that much more time than you were doing before. It's just a different way of doing it. And when you think of it, like, one, creating and nurturing relationships with the guests themselves. Number two, just using the content to stay on top of people who are already paying attention to you, right? It's not about getting a million new views because, we're reaching this whole brand new world, but it's just like the 500 people who who see me and are in my ecosystem here are seeing me consistently now. Right. And there's just something also about having the microphone in front of you and just being the person who's producing and publishing stuff that gives you a level of authority and expertise, even if we don't deserve it. Right. People still, people still mistaken us for the experts and authorities because we've given ourselves the platform, which is such an amazing thing we have as an opportunity in today's world, is to do this ourselves.
Right, exactly. And it's so funny because before 2020, I would run my own networking events, whether they were a young professional event, whether they were a real estate focused happy hour, whatever it was. And if you're the one that's running the event, I don't care what industry you work with, people are going to come up and thank you for running that event. You have power, not that in a bad way, but it's just like that you're giving people an opportunity to come and network in a area and a space that you set up for them to do so. This is the same thing. I am the host. I am the one that people come on my show and amplify their message because they know that it's going to get out to people that otherwise they're not going to reach. you know, and I think that that's one of those things that's really important because now I'm starting to see things where I've had 2 or 3 instances over the last couple of months where people have LinkedIn messaged me to ask me for title work. Like, can you do this?
Wow.
I have a deal here. Like, when on earth has that ever happened in the history of this industry and LinkedIn? It just doesn't, you know? But people see it and they want to at least engage and ask questions. And as long as you open up a conversation and a dialogue with somebody because of what you're putting out there, you've won. Like, it's starting to work. And it's only a year. You know, I've been doing this for a year. You know, and obviously, like, and like I said, beating the drum loudly. I've been beating the drum very loudly for a little bit less than a year, but still for a while now. And now all of a sudden, you're starting to see things slowly start to turn into something where the show is trying to generate business for me because it's that 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week sales rep. That's what content is. You know, I don't have to be in front of their faces in person all the time. This does it for me. It's still me. It's still my personality. It's still the same conversations that I would have with these people anyway. But then one of the other things that you mentioned too was nurturing those relationships as well. And like now what I'm trying to do and my goal, like my vision when I first started this was to take the virtual and podcasting world and eventually marry them with the in-person stuff because I could do those virtual events and I could do the podcast and that's all great. Like, I think you and I vibe really well. We've never met in person. But now all of a sudden, like, let's just say, you know, we go to lunch together and we get that real in-person connection because it's just, you know, it's just a different vibe. And then you start putting those two things together and you're just like, wow, like this can really get some legs and turn into something real. Because when I went to a in-person networking group that I'm a part of, they had probably 5 or 6 new people. 3 of the 5 people came up to me during that event where it's like, hey, Mike Ham, Morning Spotlight. I see your stuff on LinkedIn all the time. And I'm like, yes, man. Like, yes, this awesome. Is what it's all about, you know? And it's fine. Like, I'm starting to see the foundation of something that could be really cool and maybe generate a lot of business for me down the road.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So I'm curious now, as much as we bought a house 2 years ago and the only reason I even knew my title insurance person was because he was from my real estate attorney who was from my mortgage broker. All of them were in a morning breakfast networking group I was in. Right. So like that's the only reason I knew, that's the only reason I knew them. And that's why they all work together. So my understanding of that whole little flywheel of relationships is that it's mainly referrals that come in from, you know, either the real estate attorney or mortgage broker or realtor. Is that still like, is that where you're getting most of the business that's coming through the show? Like these people who are messaging you on LinkedIn, or are there people who are actually like buying their home and they're like, I want that Mike Ham guy?
Both.
Wow.
So
because that's a super rare thing in title insurance.
Yeah. Because like you said, most buyers don't, I mean, they sit at their closing table and they're like, okay, now write a check for $3,000 to Fidelity or whatever. And you're just like, what? Okay. And then you just do it. You know, so the relationship thing is obviously big. And that's why I need to know people all up and down the chain from, you know, attorneys to developers to lenders to realtors to, you know, mortgage, but whatever it is, I just need to know everybody because you never really know. Back in the day, it was all attorneys. Attorneys dictated where the title insurance went. Now it's a lot different. And knowing people like buyers, and this is just a note for anybody watching that just may be in the mindset of buying, whether it's a house or a commercial property, the buyer is the one that pays for it here in New Jersey, at least. So you should be able to dictate where that goes. You know, if you have no idea, like if you don't know me or if you don't know another title rep or whatever from my company or a different company, then you're probably going to be better off just hitching your wagon to that attorney as long as you trust your attorney and they have a good relationship and they've worked with a particular title company before. And that's kind of how it works. But if you want to make sure that you know, have easy access to a sales rep that has access to everybody that's going to put that title commitment together, there you go. Like, that's why I think buyers are like the top of the food chain when it comes to selecting title insurance. And then everybody's kind of, you know, plays second fiddle, you know, or third fiddle, whatever, but all the way down the fiddles. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely like the relationship thing because, you know, the more people, like that's with me, the more people I know, the better. And that's why I've gotten, you know, deals or at least prospective deals from people that are in that food chain, whether it's an attorney or a mortgage lender or whatever it is, And then a few instances where it's come from directly from a person buying a house, or a property, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, you said something interesting there. You said the more people that you know, but it's actually a combination of both. It's the more people you know, but it's the more people who know you. And like you said about at the networking event, is that now more people are knowing you because of the show and the content you're putting out consistently, where they're coming up and they're like, hey, man, Morning Spotlight, I see that on LinkedIn all the time. Yeah. So it's like, by doing this, being consistent and putting out great stuff that your guests are helping share, and you've cultivated this community up and down the whole orchestra of fiddles, then everybody and more people are starting to know you because you decided to just, turn on the camera and get the mic going and build your relationships in this new online way. And I love that. So over the last year, you started from scratch. You didn't even listen to podcasts, which is crazy. Like what are some of the biggest lessons you learned that you were like, whoa, yeah, this was a game changer?
Wow. So actually, because I used to run my audio through GarageBand, which I still do, but I would only run it through GarageBand because I would add my theme song to the front and the back and have, me and you talking on the same track, So that was one thing, just being able to figure out how to take two separate tracks and what to actually do, like what compression and noise, denoising and all that kind of stuff is. So that was really interesting to learn and level up the audio side of it, because, you ever get guests that come on and they're, they have no headphones, no mic, and they're in a room that's like a conference hall and the sounds echoing all over the place. And you're just like, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, I mean, obviously that stuff, the technical side of it, I've grown a lot in that side, but really just in trusting myself to have those conversations with those people. And that's ultimately what I try to do on the show, is just to talk to people, because I think at the beginning, I needed to write this stuff down because I did not know what to do. Then as I transitioned the show into what it is now, we would do a lot of panel episodes, which was like herding cats, because you try to get 3 to 4 people on one Zoom call all at once. I mean, it was just impossible. So then eventually we transitioned it, all these transitions into the solos, just one-on-one or, 2-on-1, depending on if they have another person that they want to have on there. And realizing, I mean, I mentioned this, I was on Josh's Best Guest Ever. And I think one of the big things that I just started...
inaugural episode, right?
What's that?
Was that the inaugural episode? Were you the first one?
I don't think I was. I think I might have been the second or maybe even third one. I forget. But yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that I mentioned to Josh was the interview side of it. And I think that's what people get hung up on if they're going to do an interview-based show. Yeah, it's an interview, but I started not writing anything down. I have a bio usually when I start, and then that's it. I have this. It says On Air Brands Podcast at the top. That's the only thing that I have written down, because I'm just going to talk to Todd. I have no, I'll just let him kind of drive and I'll be along for the ride. And that's kind of how I do it too. I have an idea of where I want the conversation to go. But what I said to Josh on that show was, it's people take themselves so seriously and they're so nervous about the guests. You're not Barbara Walters and you're not interviewing Saddam Hussein. It's really, because that, think of that, think of the intensity that you need to bring to that and how prepared you need to be. And I'm prepared. I mean, I listen, go to their websites and check their socials and listen to other times that they've been guests, but really it just kind of comes down to trying to connect with that person immediately, however that is. And I don't always do intro, preliminary calls. So we just jump in and we go. And you just let the magic happen. So that was one of the things too, is realizing that I have conversations for work. So why am I trying to reinvent the wheel on a podcast when I can have authentic conversations, let my personality actually shine through? And that goes back to what I was saying earlier with the authenticity and showing up as your 100% true self. The more you're able to do that, the better off you're going to be when you're trying to build trust with people that you're not engaging with directly.
Yeah, and I
so
think
that was
it's
the big thing.
It also makes it easier, right? You don't have to prep. And what's key here, and I talk about this all the time, is that you're staying in your lane, right? I know you've expanded, you have some you're big time with your NFL players and all that stuff going on, but mainly you've had a bulk of people in the real estate industry, which is where you live, that, front and back. And so you don't need to prepare yourself to have conversations about the real estate industry, because that's what you live naturally. And so that makes it a faster process for you also, where you're having these same conversations. This is your area of expertise. So when you know how you can stay in your lane, be yourself, just show off your personality, you don't need to prep. Like, it's hard to tell people not to be nervous when they're on the camera if they've never done it before, but like,
Right.
It's not anything to be nervous about, right? Like, it's very low stakes when it all said and done. Like, like you said, you're not Barbara Walters.
Right, exactly. So it's like very low stakes. And I think that understanding who your audience is, and that's been something that I've also gotten better at, and looking, like, using analytics. I mean, I host on Anchor, which is, everybody tends to have their own opinion of Anchor, but it gives you information. Yeah, it gives you information on who listens to your show, age, gender, location, what kind of apps they're listening on, or, Spotify or iTunes or whatever it is, what devices they're listening on. So then you can kind of like craft your message and what you're trying to get across if you're doing these interviews to those people. So for me, I started noticing that my audience were people that were a lot like me, 25 to 35 in the Northeast primarily. So what are they? They're people that are either new to real estate, they're entrepreneurs in some sense of the word, like if they're starting a business or whatever. They're just young professionals. They're people that are in a 9-to-5 job that want to get started in real estate. So then I have somebody on that has gone through that. And it really comes down to, like, I think at the beginning I was trying to be very technical with how we talked about, different things. Whether, if we're going to talk about 1031 exchanges, we got down to the nitty gritty on how to format a 1031 exchange, like Snooze Fest. But even though that was a great episode, I'm sorry if those guys get offended to that, but that was a great episode. But you're not really connecting with what it is that they're looking for, the audience that you have. So while they're going to get the educational side of it, they're also going to learn the story. Like if I have a multifamily syndicator who's, a former teacher, and then she eventually got out of teaching to invest full time in multifamily units around the country, people may listen to that and be like, hey, I could do that. That sounds a lot like me, or like what I'm interested in. Or if they're an attorney and they're doing the same thing. Like I know for a fact I have audience members that are going through that exact same process of some of the guests that I've had on my show. So now all of a sudden you start building this relationship with the guest to your audience as well as me, because I'm the control. I'm the only thing that's here every week. So they show up for me, I hope, fingers crossed. And then they come, the guests are there to add a story that may resonate with a person that's listening to the show. So now all of a sudden you have an engaged community that wants to connect more with that guest, with me, because I'm the one that's bringing them to the table to, educate and entertain them. So I think that really understanding who your audience is and what they're looking for is really important. And there are ways that I know I need to be better with that, but that's just something that's slowly but surely starting to kind of turn the tide on what the podcast is doing and the success that it's having.
Yeah. Well, dude, this was awesome, man. I really appreciate you coming in last minute and dropping all these bombs today, because what your whole story and approach, and to hear it, from start to where you are now, and I know you're going to even explode into even more massive success from this in the future, is really, a great tale for our audience who is just getting started or thinking about getting started with a show, to see what's possible and to see, not to have the hangups that, I'm too boring, or this is too boring of a topic, or I don't know what I'm doing from a technical perspective, right? Like all of those things can be overcome when you just have the right mindset like you took, and can create like massive success for the business. So props, man. Congratulations. Your show is awesome. You're doing a great job. I love following you and being, in your whole ecosystem. I love and support what you have going on. TheMorningSpotlight.com is the site, right?
That's right.
So,
that is the hub. That is the hub.
That's it. So if you guys want to go and check out the coolest guy in title insurance, very low bar, but he is at the top, TheMorningSpotlight.com, and really go and check out his show as an example of what a great show can be for your business, to help you build relationships, cultivate that community, get people engaged, and then ultimately gaining traction with actual ROI for your business growth. So this has been officially the first episode of hopefully many in the future, on and off, of the Ham and G's On Air Brands episode. And thank you guys for tuning in. We will catch you on the next episode.